this evening's agenda. Are there any questions, comments, reasons to discuss our 5 p.m. agenda? Yes, we do. We do need to add a second resolution to this evening. Let's see, that is under presentations, and we have a resolution that has been approved by the commissioners for School Resource Officer Month. Do we have consent to add that? All right, thank you. Thank you for that, Vice Chair Moore. Are there any other items to discuss? Questions? All right, if not, Dane Peterson, our Solid Waste Director, is here with joined by some FCC staff for an update. How are you?
Jerry Edwards, Commissioners, good afternoon. Good to see everybody. And as you know, January 1st of this year, FCC began servicing unincorporated areas of Buncombe County for solid waste and recycling pickup. And as we are about a month and a half mark into the new service, the new contract, we wanted to provide an update to the board. And as you said, Chair, we have Charles Merkley with FCC and also Lewis Knight with FCC, and they're going to provide some information and give an update.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, fellow commissioners, staff. My name is Charles Merkley, Vice President of Business Development for FCC North America. With me is Lewis Oliver, our General Manager, local here at our address at 3109 Sweeten Creek Road, Asheville, North Carolina. If I may, I should say, can I present a PowerPoint and then we could go through questions if that's appropriate? Try to move this forward. There we go. So here's the things we would like to cover that I think is near and dear to everyone here. And we have some good updates, and we still have some work to go, but we'll get through this. So with that being said, if you don't mind, I'm going to look at the monitor as well. We have 38,923 current customers, and that changes daily, obviously. And that's about roughly 3,300 more customers than the previous listing that was provided to the county and to us. We have delivered all these carts, so it's close to 78,000 carts have been delivered. Now, bear in mind that's recycle and the garbage, and there's multiple sizes, and we did the multiple sizes based on the list of data that was generated provided to us. As you can see, the county staff and Dane's folks have asked us, our drivers are driving these streets Monday through Friday. If we happen to see the previous hauler carts, to make sure that we annotate that, send it so they can get collected. Dane and his staff are having them going to pick up their carts. Well, what that subsequently does is provides waste in all carts, so it behooves all of us to get the previous haulers' carts out of there. And then you can just see a brief inventory of what we have. Again, that changes. You can see we have another order of carts that will be here next week. And then also bear carts. Bear carts have been a phenomenal request. We've already put out close to 1,000 bear carts, and it continues to climb. So the good part is we got 300 more coming. We know that there's about 150. We're currently able to provide bear carts. Some we're providing 96 gallon because of the fact that, to be honest, we're out. So we're getting them as quick as we can. So one thing I think it's important, route completion and the Dane and his staff and the county manager staff have asked us to provide that daily. And we did that. This is always lags a week behind. So this is kind of our completion of routes daily. And then you'll see, which is also important, that's a yearly stat. This is from our call data center that is being compiled by our systems as well as the county systems that monitor this. And you can see for January, we were at the 97 percentile of satisfaction of completion. And you can see this was through the previous week. I subsequently added a slide that I got this morning for the update, but we've got to 98.042. But you can also see here there's other cities. The staff has asked us how do we do in other cities and other counties around our contracts, and you can see same data, same information, and it's in the 99.9 percentile. Are we there here yet? No, obviously, and that's what we're aiming to improve. With that, you can see a graph that our call center puts together of how the calls come in. At the peak of the start, they were over 2,000, and now I can tell you as of last week through Friday, we had 974, and you can see the trend, but you can also see on subsequent slides why we still haven't hit it yet. So with that, that kind of breaks down the information that is generated by the calls. And you can see by the pie chart, and you can see, missed, repeated missed, carts, things that we know we have to improve on, and that is the goal. You can see also there that is the 98.042 piece, and you can, it's a snippet, but you can see how it compares to like a Hillsborough County, Florida, Orange County, Florida, larger contracts with the same type of data that is being mined and collected. Now, this is the most latest I received this morning. It's through last week because we always lag a week behind on stats. It's now in the 98.42%. So we're improving, but that's 974 calls. And if you take that in a percentage basis, that's 500 and some calls we're still not getting right. So we understand that. That's 1.3% or whatever. Are we ever going to be perfect? We always strive to be perfect, but I don't think we ever achieve perfect, as you see some of the other stats. But it's still too many calls, and we recognize that. And for you to be dealing with it, we understand that. So some of the things of how we remedy a situation, and this is just a protocol and policy we use of how any kind of a misresolution comes in. This is how we go about it. This is how Lewis and his staff do the process. Is the process perfect? Yeah, in a perfect world, yes. Does it always hit on perfect cylinders? No, because you can see our percentage is just not perfect. But this is the process that our local team goes through on a daily basis. And it just tells you the procedure. And we have this printed out for all of our customer service reps and even our overflow call centers so they understand the process. With that, these are some of the things that we have addressed for service improvements. So that kind of reiterates probably back on the previous slide, but some of the same information. So we recognize this. By doing that, we brought in right from the beginning and continue to this day have regional staff from all over the country that are here every day. We always have a regional manager here every week, either myself or the RVP or a senior manager with FCC is here weekly. The staff and Dane had asked us how long is that going to continue. That's going to continue till we can get to that 99%, 99.99. And that's always hard to achieve, but that is always our goal. So as you can see, the support staff is here every day. Obviously, the support staff does many different things. They support the local drivers. They mentor our drivers. They help inexperienced drivers and such.
Can I just ask a question about that previous slide?
Absolutely.
You currently seeking 10 more drivers, or you've got 10 more drivers since you created this slide, I guess is my question.
Yeah, these are support, above and beyond.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
In addition to what you have operating today. Okay.
That is correct, sir. So you can see on that slide, we have the equipment, we have the people. Obviously, people and equipment change every day based on a myriad of things. But the point is, we always had enough equipment. We always had enough people. This is above and beyond the regional that support on every startup we do. And again, there is still perfection to be made. We're not there, but this is how we're going to achieve it. This is some of the community outreach that we're doing. Lewis has attended one already. Some of our senior managers are attending, myself. Mitch Dahlstrom, our regional vice president, will be attending, among others. We got some really good, great feedback last Thursday. I think one of the commissioners talked to Lewis, and some of the things that's more frustrating than anything for us is the cart distribution and people still calling about carts. We understand that. And the amount of carts that we have delivered, we're kind of frustrated, just like the residents, is why haven't they got the carts, or where did the carts go? But we have a listing of every cart that we delivered. So with that, that's our community outreach, and we want to continue to be a partner in the community. That is our presentation, and Lewis and myself are here to answer any of your questions or concerns.
I think if I could summarize my biggest concern at the moment, it's people whose trash are getting missed a couple weeks, more than 3 weeks in a row. And so that's my main concern I want to convey to you. And I guess I'm curious if there's an issue with like identifying the location of your customers, or if it's just a matter of setting up the routes, or if you can kind of summarize what the issue is, just so people understand.
Sure, understandable. And Commissioner, we're just as frustrated as the resident. So the process is we do technology like any other service provider. We have tablets in our trucks. We also have paper information as well. As you know, it's not always the street. We clearly believe we have the right equipment with the, for the streets. It is making sure that all of these hit on all cylinders, and what we have done to try to combat that, because obviously that is a concern, is we have now, as that slide I showed you, accountability. Everyone in our local office has accountability to make sure we create an internal data point of anyone that has been missed more than once or twice. Once, okay, we made a mistake, but repeated is a problem. So we have created an internal data that we use for our own internal use to make sure that Lewis and his team make sure they follow up, and that process is followed. And obviously, there's been some that's failed. So that is a process that we have with our IT group and with our training group that are here weekly to do training and retraining to make sure that if we have anything more than once, that our internal data is checked and rechecked and not have the repeat again. So that's an ongoing process that we're trying to fix now.
Let me follow up on that, please. Can you help me understand, so you have the local location now, and so do you have people there taking the phone calls? Because part of the frustration I hear from the community repeatedly is that they're calling this call center and that they're being told by whomever is answering the phone, by your staff, that they can't pull up their account, they can't see anything, that they can't give them any information because they're just at this call center. And so that's part of the frustration, and I hear this from multiple community members over and over. So can you talk about how you're addressing that? So to your point, that there is accountability, because it seems like to our community that there is no accountability.
Well, yes, Commissioner, and we have 46 call people that are dedicated to the Buncombe County. Is that more than needed? Yes, but right now that's what's needed. So what we do is make sure that they have, and I've heard the same, I've seen the other emails about somebody in Colorado, they don't know what they're talking about, they can't give us an answer, and we have addressed that by, we have our local call people that are well-versed. Everyone has a copy of the scope of work of the contract, so they can't say, I don't know, because they look it up. So we have it at their fingertips. We have TVs like you have around here that is showing where our routes are. So that is all being, we're sending people to the call center. That call center is only designed for overflow. So if we can take care of the service interruptions, we don't need that overflow. We have local call people. We have our Houston FCC call center that are very versed in the contract, and we want to keep the calls local. So Lewis and his team should be able to handle every call that comes in there. Right now, we're at 98.47. We need to be 99.999, and we are striving to get there.
And so the number that people should be calling so that they actually get this local call center, what is that number?
Yes, it is, and it's a Ring Central phone system, and it rolls. So the biggest problem we were having, and you all heard it, was, I've been on hold for 20 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever that may be. We fixed that roll system so it doesn't, the people just want to hear somebody, but they need to know the information. So that's why we're sending people to the overflow call center from our staff to train them on this specific contract.
And so the number, you're just wanting them to call what number? The same number they've been calling?
Yes, Commissioner, that's correct.
Okay, and then you said that you have a local location now, and I missed the address. What did you say the address is?
Yeah, we've had that office since, I don't know, the spring, but it's 3109 Sweeten Creek Road. And there's many residents that have come to our location and picked up carts. That's not the ideal way to do it, of course, but if they would like to, we accommodate them immediately.
Thank you.
So the call volume that we're looking at on slide 3.1, it's the highlights of 296 calls per day. Does that take into account the calls and emails that the commissioners are receiving and sending to the solid waste team, or are these just the calls that are coming directly to FCC?
These are calls that are coming in directly through our system. So whatever's calling that number, 828, I forget the whole number, but whatever the local number is, that's where we're tracking that from.
Okay.
But no, does it include an escalation from maybe Dane or the county manager or from you? No, they're separate. So they're hard to put in our data. So we could add that to the data, but it doesn't roll up in the raw data.
All right. It might be helpful to know how that compares to
Absolutely.
what you're collecting. And I think there's a missing piece that we haven't discussed, are the number of people who are experiencing issues that don't know where to go and who to call to be accessed. So while, you're saying the numbers are decreasing, I think there's still a lot of folks out there that are unaware of how to reach you.
Understood. And through the community outreach, hopefully that's one way of doing it. We try to get in front of HOA groups if we can, but you're correct. It's always difficult, and I'm a customer too somewhere, and I like to be able to get hold of somebody and get an answer.
Thank you.
And as a follow-up to that question, so when you showed us, it was on one of your earlier slides about the satisfaction rate, like what are you using to come up with that number of, I think it was 97, 98%? What data are you using to come up with that?
It's the data that's coming in through our call centers.
Okay.
We're using it purely on what the customer's calling about. It's recorded in a system we call. It's called Track Easy, but the county has access to that as well. So it's not an FCC private system. The county has the opportunity to look at it as well.
Thank you.
So first, thanks for being here to speak with us today. Obviously sanitation is critical. It's a key part of what we do, and y'all are critical partners in this. So it's important that we're talking about how we can support each other through this, and there has been some improvement. We obviously have a lot of folks who still have concerns. What is the process for dispatching bins? And if someone does reach out and says, my trash was picked up, do they need to wait another week before they get caught the next time around, or do you send out a truck to get missed bins that week?
So the process is, as soon as they come in, we process them, and contractually we have a time to deliver those carts. So obviously it's first come in, first go out, so it's not a hold or wait and see. If they've got trash on the ground, Lewis and his team have to dispatch it to a support route or a truck that's out there to collect it.
Okay, so this should happen before the following week
It should before their next collection day if they have garbage on the ground, yes, or recyclables.
Great. And do you all have enough bins right now to get out to folks? Is there a backlog on bins?
The only backlog, Commissioner, we have right now are bear carts. Other than that, we have regular carts. You saw the inventory, but again, we have a reserve inventory that the county has graciously let us use a landfill that we have over there. So we have bins in reserve or carts, and we haven't had to pull from those yet, but our next load is due in next week, so we don't think we'll have to. And I apologize. There's so many numbers that I do. I apologize. I can't remember it. So
Dane, will you repeat that one more time, and I will repeat it over the microphone? 828. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Lillian. Lillian saves the day.
Lillian smacked me here. That number is 828-820-7022.
Thank you.
And as we're having thank you for being here for one, and secondarily, as we're having our community lean recovery discussions, I noted y'all are going to be there. Can our residents show up at that session and expect to be able to address any issue that they have with FCC in terms of carts?
Pick up.
yeah, absolutely. That's why we're there. We want to fix their issues as badly as they want them fixed.
Well, I feel like we got a little lucky here because we're in the middle of a winter here, but for those who may not know, bears are a thing in this community. So just to prepare you for what the spring is going to look like, this is something we're all hoping to rush, not just to put pressure on you, but realistically, it's going to be a health and safety issue as the weather gets nicer.
Yeah, and we made a commitment to Buncombe County, and we are going to do everything to become your solid partner.
Thank you.
And I had one more quick question. I was glad to hear that you mentioned that folks could come in to pick up bins. I think on a personal note, I think we went 4 weeks without a bin, and we would open a ticket and then wouldn't hear back. I'm just curious, what hours is that Sweeten Creek location open if folks do need to go and pick up bins in person?
Lewis?
Someone's there from 6 a.m. in the morning till 7 o'clock at night.
Okay. Thank y'all so much. And we know that it's a tough. Y'all started right after a huge natural disaster, and then the ice hit, so it's been difficult. And we know that it's a tough job, and sanitation work is critical, and sanitation workers work really hard. Not lost on me that Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. His last campaign was for sanitation workers because it's a tough job and they deserve respect. So we appreciate all you're doing out there. It's a tough job.
And thank you. We value our employees very much, and we understand the job they have to do.
Are there any further questions?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Whitesides.
Thanks again for coming out today. But, I have serious concerns because we're looking at 60 days now. And, I understand it would take, you started even before January. But we're going into 60 days. And I've been on the commission now. I'm in my 9th year. I went through Waste Pro. I've been through a lot. And I live in the city of Asheville. And I've gotten more calls and people stopping me at the supermarket, at church, everywhere I go about their garbage collection. And I understand it's nice, to start out. But I'll be honest with you. I worked for 40 years in banking. And I had people who worked with me, I'll tell you, I had no patience when it comes to poor customer service. But guys, you've got to clean it up because they're beating us to death with this. I saw 3 emails, reading my emails today before coming. And I've never run into what we're running into now. And what concerns me, I'm beginning to hear more about garbage than the Helene problem with the storm. So, I hope you understand. We're patient, but it's running out. We've got to see results. And as long as I get calls and I see the emails, I'm assuming that you all are not doing your job. So, let's turn things around and do it quick. If you need more help, let's get it. How many people do you have in the call center here?
Here locally, we have a half a dozen.
6. And
That
the
is
rest are going all over the country.
No, they roll back to anybody that's available, but some do go to
Yeah,
our
that could
Houston.
be anywhere in the country, right?
No, sir. They go either to our Houston site or our global call center in Colorado.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're anywhere in the country. Yeah, okay, thanks. But that's my 2 cents. But I'm just one commissioner. But I'm fed up from what I see and what I hear from our constituents. And like I said, I don't even live in the area where we have your service. I live in the city where we do have good service. But something got to give. That's how I'll leave it with you. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm not satisfied with what I see. I hear what my other, partners are saying, but it doesn't fly with me. So
Understood.
good luck. I hope you can turn it around and
In
do
our
it
next
quick.
briefing, hopefully I'm telling you a different story, sir.
I hope so.
And I have just 2 more quick questions that I've received. I just want to ask, should folks expect to receive any discounts on their bill for weeks of missed service? Or if folks need to take in their own trash to the transfer station, is that a reimbursable expense?
Yes, we are doing a deep dive on those people. Like I said, we have all the data, and that our billing, so everybody knows, we haven't billed a soul yet in Buncombe County, and that's being addressed prior to any billing that goes out.
I have a question.
One question.
Does that mean that people's bills are going to be doubled?
No, anybody that may have a repeated or problem with service, we're looking at, and we would do a credit, yes.
Okay.
And I have
Commissioner
a
Mills.
follow-up question for Dane, if I may, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and just to Commissioner Whiteside's point, can you help remind us about, we have a contract, and when do the penalties start? Because I know within that contract, we had some very strict or set obligations and accountability. And can you speak to that, please?
Yes, ma'am. So, talking with our legal team about quote-unquote grace period, there is none in this contract. There's no defined, hey, we're going to give you this many days to get service right. I think that's just this group and staff being realistic about expectations. To Commissioner Whiteside's point, though, performance has to be there. So when you think about Chapter 17 of our franchise contract with FCC, that talks about missed service, that talks about carts, that talks about service levels. And if those are not met, it is a very punitive contract. There's no doubt about that. So, for example, when you think about the chart with missed service, so 1 to 10 valid misses during any calendar month, that's $200 per valid miss. So what is that valid miss? That means if staff, anybody gets a notification that there's a missed service, we report that to FCC. If that's between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. that day, that has to be corrected that day and verified by the contractor that it is addressed, or that becomes a valid miss. So it multiplies from there. So the next line on that chart is 11 to 20 valid misses during the month. That bumps up to $300 per valid miss. 21 or more valid misses during any one calendar month, $500 per valid miss. So, and then it gets more punitive when you've got 200 or more valid misses during any one calendar month. That's $5,000 plus the unit rate per valid miss. So those things, if service is not there, those things add up very quickly and are heavy.
When do we start enforcing?
Well, that's something that we set that bar of 98% of routes covered by February. That's not in the contract. That was just our minimum expectation of you have to be here, period, just to show us that you're getting service ramped up and it's going the direction it needs to be. So, again, there's no grace period. Those penalties can be assessed. And I think it was at the start of the contract, unfortunately, I knew what some of this was going to look like. I don't care what company was coming in here, how they approached it. We were going to have many, many, many challenges. Now, it's time, right? It's time now that the rubber's got to meet the road. So FCC understands the accountability metrics in the contract. They expect to be held accountable, and that's our part, is to make sure that they are held accountable to the service levels.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any further questions? All right. Thank you, Dane. Thank you, FCC. We appreciate it.
Commissioners.
All right, we move on to our next agenda item, which is our bi-monthly Helene update. And we'll let our county manager kick us off.
Excuse me. Thanks, Commissioners. I believe Dane didn't go very far because we're starting off our Helene update today with debris cleanup. And Dane, you're up first.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, County Manager. All right. Here to provide an update on the debris removal process that is ongoing. Lillian's got a lot of trust in me on this media, thinking the video is going to just press play. Second, okay. All right. We wanted to provide some graphics today, too. I know we've talked a lot about numbers and metrics, but wanted to show some of the work that's going on in the field as well. Apologize. Okay. Stop pressing the buttons. That will. So right-of-way debris removal, first mission that we're talking about. Obviously, that mission is ongoing with right-of-way debris removal. That continues across all 9 zones that are designated in our county. Second pass is going in every zone right now. So some zones which were harder hit when you think about Swannanoa, Fairview, Barnersville areas, they're lower percentage of second pass complete at this point because there's so much more debris in those areas, but they are on second pass right now. So typically in disaster situations like this, you see 3 passes that come through, like through our partners FEMA to the Corps and their contractor Ashbridge. So there'll be a lot of notification and information going out to our residents as far as when second pass is coming close to completion, as to when final call for passes is coming. Make sure all your debris material is out because they're coming through one last time. So that's something we're working through with Tetra Tech and all of our partners to make sure that we're going to be communicating that ahead of time. Oh, here we go. Okay. It's okay. So let's talk about timeline with debris removal missions. So October of last year, right-of-way removal began. And obviously that's going to be ongoing. November of last year, private property removal program intake launched. So that was the start of the process with Tetra Tech to attain the right of entries from our residents that were interested in private property debris removal. And we started getting that information in November of last year. Title property, think about title property, vehicles, boats, automobiles, all those type things. That process started January, so last month. Waterways and private property cleanups, the actual debris removal part for those missions, began this month of this year. And looking ahead, so currently this month through the end of June of this year, right-of-way, waterway, and private property will be continuing. So all those efforts are ongoing, right-of-way ongoing, and then ramping up as we're seeing private property and waterway missions getting further ramped up. So private property, this number I got to update before we came into the chamber just a little while ago, and that number's over 2,900. And I think it's 2,920 applications that we've received. So that is certainly encouraging to see those numbers. So far in the field, as far as private property cleanup, they have Ashbridge has completed 115 parcels, so cleaned up 115, and there's 149 in the field that are in progress right now. So they're ramping up to 30 crews, and their goal is to have 25 properties cleaned up per day. So they're looking at the timeline, that same thing we're talking about with, they're looking at the 2,900. Obviously, not all of those are in their lap as far as work package yet. That's still flowing through FEMA to the Corps and then getting to Ashbridge. So, but they see the numbers. They know where that's at. So they're planning on all 2,900 of those cleanups being done by the end of January, substantially complete. So that mission is certainly ramping up. waterway debris removal. It was a good field trip. I know several members of the commission got to come see the action in the field. Commissioner Whiteside, you got to talk to one of the main Ashbrit folks with the equipment. There's some really cool equipment out there, and it's one of those whatever it takes type thing. There's all kind of methods. We'll show you next time. There's all the expensive equipment and all the crews that are out. So it's impressive to see the work ongoing. Currently, the waterway missions are going in the French Broad. I know there were some videos floating around with the Craven Street Bridge, and they were working on. They actually had a barge out with a crane on top of it, a grapple. So French Broad, Swannanoa, Cane Creek, and Ivy Creek. Ivy Creek being in the Barnesville area. So they're fanning out, and as of today, pretty good comfort level. They would hit 100,000 cubic yards of debris removed from the waterway to this point. So things are going well there, and they'll continue to ramp up. 18 crews currently in the field working waterway, and again, their goal is to have at least 25 crews working waterway debris mission. Removal of tidal property. So this work is ongoing as well. County staff, our debris RSF team, working with our EOC folks in the field, identifying the tidal property. So 3 vehicles and 1 semi-truck have been towed so far. We know that through the waterway debris mission, there'll be more vehicles that are coming out. We know they're there. At least 25 to 30 vehicles will be coming out. And when you're getting on the banks and you're pulling things out, there's stuff that you don't know is there, right? So I'm sure there'll be more tidal property that we uncover and all kinds of other material. One thing that was encouraging, sorry to bounce back to PPDR, so Ashbrit has basically trained up their crews that are in the field working private property debris removal because, I'm getting my property cleaned up. My neighbors are coming to see, what's going on. So I think we're already starting to see a spike in interest because Ashbrit's crews, they've informed them, hey, if these folks have questions or are interested in the program, here's how you get a hold of the intake center or the call center. Here's the intake. Here's how to get that process started. So there is certainly a lot of interest being generated by seeing the debris work going on. So, those are the general updates I have, and be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions for Dane?
If not, Matt
Great.
Cable is next on housing.
Great. Thanks, Dane. We appreciate all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. So the first slide, we're trying to get some more graphic representation of trends over time as we move forward. And so what we have here are the FEMA reported damaged units. So you can see over time, as more assessments are completed, we are identifying more damaged units within the county. You'll note that the number of destroyed units has increased over time, but has remained fairly stable, with our major damage being that orange color at the bottom increasing fairly steadily, but we're hoping to see those numbers slow. And this graphic is intended to show how sheltering and temporary housing play a role and how individuals and households within those types of supports are transitioning across or through the disaster over time. So initially, looking back at kind of that November 1st period, the majority of households were within the TSA program. So we had a lot of households checked in. That number, which is that lighter green, has diminished across time. The current, most recent count in preparation for this meeting was 513 households, or about 33% of households that are receiving some sort of FEMA housing support. And then the number that's now the largest in that lighter blue are households that are receiving rental assistance. So what we're seeing over time is those moves from the more temporary response, emergency shelter, TSA, into a rental assistance or a direct housing provision through FEMA resources. The other item to note is just the general decline of the overall total. So you'll see that as you look at the graphic. And what that indicates is folks who have exited needing FEMA support. That could be for a number of reasons, and that's data that we'll look to have more clarity on as we move forward. Things like if a home was inaccessible early on after the disaster and now is accessible, they may no longer need that resource. if there were utility connections that weren't available that became available. So there are reasons that folks may have exited the program outside of an ineligibility criteria. And while our partners at HHS are going to speak more about TSA response and case management generally, we did just want to provide an update on TSA. That number is now at 513 households. That's about a 30% reduction since we last presented on the number of households in TSA to you on the 4th. And so we provided that update again. About 80% of Buncombe County households that are in TSA are in TSA within Buncombe County. There are about 110 households outside of, from Buncombe County, outside of Buncombe County in TSA. We normally provide a breakdown of the exits. There were some issues within the TSA notification system. So the bulk of those households are potentially slated to exit on the 7th, but we don't have the split between those who have been identified for exit on the 7th and those who would be reevaluated on the 28th of February. So hopefully at the next briefing we can give you updated information on the number of households to exit on the 7th and then those that would exit on the 21st of March. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Matt, going back to your green and blue slide, sheltering and temporary housing, I think I'm thinking about the 994 people receiving rental assistance. When we think of these, there's so many numbers where I think of this where, are we talking about Buncombe County residents that are being helped within Buncombe County, or is this number inclusive of Buncombe County residents who are getting rental assistance but perhaps living in an apartment 2 counties away?
Right, and so this house, what we're getting data on is Buncombe County households. And so if they are utilizing that rental assistance for rental elsewhere, we don't necessarily have that particular data immediately available. It's something we can look at getting to understand if they're seeking to rent outside of Buncombe County. But this is actually just the number of households that are receiving rental assistance for rentals, not necessarily specifically to rental in Buncombe.
And so to kind of ask a question in a different way, do any of these numbers include people who previous to the storm weren't Buncombe County residents but are now being housed in Buncombe County through some sort of assistance program?
No, so we are focusing on just the residents within Buncombe County and their housing statuses.
And last question, specifically those 994 people receiving rental assistance, I'm sure it's case by case, but is there some sort of expected deadline of when those people will lose that assistance?
So rental assistance functions similarly to TSA and any other program. There are going to be eligibility criteria. The way rental assistance generally works is that you're provided a certain amount of funding up front to pay your rent due. So the individual household actually receives the funds from FEMA and they make the rent payments. So it might be that you're required to provide additional leasing information to prove that payment has been made, that you've maintained the rental. So there would be different kind of eligibility requirements to continue to receive it. But just like other programs, there's also going to be a terminus to the period of time covered, and it's based on disaster dates and eligibility periods ending.
Okay, thank you.
I guess as a follow-up to that, I'd love some clarity on what we can, or where the brainstorming should be taking place for how we account for these folks, not with ambiguity around what's happening federally. We have no control over that. But seeing that number go on the 1st of this month to 870 to 100 more people in about 17 days till the 18th, is that number going to go up? If that number goes up, that changes a little bit of our calculus about how long we're going to be in the midst of this financial struggle, and knowing that there is a terminus point for us. What are we doing to brainstorm the unpredictability behind that? Because that's a big number at February.
So, rental assistance, what we're concerned about in terms of rental assistance is it is a next step. It's more stable housing. You're getting out of a hotel, which does seem like a more tenuous housing in TSA, into a more stable rental. But we are cognizant of, and from a planning perspective through recovery, of what happens after FEMA rental assistance ends. And our biggest concern would be a mismatch of the rental rate that FEMA is able to afford and the rental rate that the tenant the renter is able to afford. And so if we end the period of eligibility and there is that mismatch, there will be an issue. So that's a real focus of our short and long-term rental work group, as well as the housing task force. So they are cognizant and aware and concerned about that. So we're looking at data about self-reported income that we can pull from FEMA data, trying to match it back to the rental assistance households and figure out where we're landing in terms of longer-term viability of that rental for that household. So each household is a unique situation, and trying to get at the root of that and understand where we might be when rental assistance from FEMA is no longer available.
And I guess what I'm tackling here is not, and this is not to put it all on you, you're just kind of stuck in front of the microphone, but realistically, I don't know that this number goes down just based on what we're doing with housing, because evictions are going to continue to take place, and that's because of other factors. That has to do with jobs, that has to do with any number of factors that are causing people who might have been able to make rent up till now, seeing their jobs disappear. So I guess as we're brainstorming what we do next, I guess it's a multifaceted piece, me just flagging that of like, how do we plan for that eventuality? Because I don't see people in large numbers going from unemployed to employed all of a sudden. I think we're seeing the opposite for reasons beyond our control, but we have to be aware of that as we're moving forward. And I just want to make sure there's a group looking at that somewhere.
And that's, there are kind of two sides to the rental assistance. There's rental assistance for displaced households or households with damage. There's also rental assistance components for economically impacted households. So those households, where you have lost wages or lost employment as a result of the disaster, aren't necessarily FEMA rental assistance eligible, right? Because it's not a damaged rental unit, not, their potential eviction or ejectment issue may be economic and not directly related to a housing impact. So there is another group that is working on rental assistance as it stands normally for issues related to income and loss of rental. And so that is another work group, and another focus of the task force is how we assist households that wouldn't be eligible for rental assistance from FEMA, but did have economic impacts as a result of the storm. So two different sides. This data is purely on FEMA rental assistance, which is based on displacement.
And the one thing, Commissioner, that we need to work on here will be permanent housing, right?
Right.
So the units that we will put online via Cox Avenue or Ferry Road, that would help to address this issue, but not the payment side of it, not the income. Yeah.
Are there any further questions for Matthew? All right. Thank you so much.
David Sweat is coming up to talk about disaster case management.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you. Want to recognize that I've got with me Lizzie Scheimer today, who's one of our social work managers, and she has been very instrumental in this. So I just wanted to acknowledge that she's done a tremendous amount of work on disaster case management and give you a chance to see who she is. But you may remember her from our mass feeding efforts back earlier. We have been involved in disaster case management and navigation here since October the 27th. And right now, as of today, was the scheduled end date, although I believe that's been extended by one more week for our involvement as Buncombe County resources to help people connect to the needs, whoever has the resource to meet the need they have. And we really are involved in referral linkage, and that's really identifying what the need is and then linking them to who has the resource. That's the primary purpose of disaster case management. You interview the person or that family with a need, identify what the needs are, and then link them to the resources that can best meet their need if they're available. And right now that has been provided by Tetra Tech and Buncombe County staff, and we've served over 3,600 households, and that's over 2,400 different interactions with folks. A lot of those have been those same folks that Matt was just talking about, who were in transitional sheltering assistance, the TSA households and the 23 hotels. But also in December 19th, the state of North Carolina began to hire and train and deploy disaster case managers who are state employees. So these are state resources assigned to take over the work of disaster case management in Buncombe County, and this is paid for by FEMA funds that the state of North Carolina is receiving. And right now we have 7 disaster case managers assigned that work for the state who are taking this work over. And so, as I said, it's FEMA funded but state delivered, and anybody who lives in an impacted county, one of the 24 counties, can apply for disaster case management assistance. All they have to be is a resident of an impacted county. So far, we have 730 applications from Buncombe County residents that are in process with those state case managers. And so the way it works is there's a call center, a central call center in Raleigh that receives the intake, and then the cases are assigned to tiers based on the level of need, and that is identified as part of the intake process interview. And as I noted, as of February 16th, we had 730 Buncombe County applications. Some of those are Tier 4. Those require weekly contact. So those are your more complex needs. They need more regular follow-up. Tier 3, they get follow-up from the case manager every 2 weeks. And a Tier 2 is they get follow-up on a monthly basis from their assigned case manager. And what those case managers are doing are making the same sort of referral linkages that we've been doing. They're just taking over that work. We do not have any information about demographics because that's not part of the intake form. What we do know is that of the 730 applications, 716 were applied in English, 2 were in Russian, and 10 were in Spanish. So we know that we have some variety of languages that folks speak when they're asking for assistance, but the state intake form does not capture any other demographic information. In terms of the level or the type of housing or their housing status, we know that 325 of those who have applied are homeowners, 237 are involving rentals, 24 in subsidized housing, and then there's 143 where their issue is not really structurally related. It's not about their housing, but they have some other need. And right now, what we're doing, our primary role right now is to help this process become more organized and help the state, the handoff, the transition from our staff and Tetra Tech staff to the state staff to become, function more seamlessly and be a more successful handoff. What we face as our major challenge is that the number of disaster case managers assigned by the state to meet the needs of people in Buncombe County is insufficient. And so we have proposed a variety of solutions and are trying to work through those potential solutions to increase the number of case managers that are working here. And we did put in a proposal to have Tetra Tech hire case managers and be reimbursed or paid to do that by North Carolina Emergency Management. I think there's a counter proposal from North Carolina Emergency Management currently on the table where they would say, we'll hire additional people and send them to Buncombe County. As I said in our EOC briefing last week, I actually don't care where the help comes from as long as we get more help, because that's what our citizens need is more help. So we just need more case managers right now, and we are in discussions with North Carolina Emergency Management to hammer out how that could be accomplished. In fact, there's a meeting tomorrow with them about this issue. And but we are out there promoting disaster case management, and this is a picture that Stacy Wood's team gave us from the work the other night in Barnardsville. So this is at the roadshow. We have a table where people can come up and sign up for disaster case management. We're also, if you look at County Central, that how to ask for that disaster case management assistance is being promoted on our websites and in other ways by CAPE. So between our staff, CAPE, and other partners in the community, we're promoting awareness. Just in the 2 weeks that we've been working on this presentation and my discussion with you about it today, we went from having 640 applications to 730 applications. So we know that residents are, as they become more aware of the opportunity to ask for this kind of assistance, they're signing up. And as I say, Lizzie and I are both here to answer any questions that you may have.
Does anyone have questions for David or Lizzie? Yes. Yes.
Sure. The number to call, and this is to go once again to the state call center, 844-746-2326. So if folks call that number, they will get the initial intake interview over the phone with the state call center, and then that will be routed to the team of case manager, the team organizing case management on our behalf. Lizzie, did I misspeak, or is that accurate? That's accurate, so that's good.
Thanks. And Commissioners, this is the one category that we do not get reimbursed for from FEMA. As you're aware, this is all, the ones that we were doing with Tetra Tech, that was all county funded at this point. So one of the reasons David is talking about is trying to transition that to be state funded, FEMA funded, or some other form of funding is where we're talking about right now.
Thank you for that reminder. Are there any other questions for David?
Well, you kind of answered this, but I just want to clarify for folks who may be following along. We get emails about who's keeping track of what data. You kind of clarified, and I think it was your third slide of the breakout of languages. But this is a state-driven form, right? So we wouldn't have any of the data for racial demographics. It's not an unwillingness to collect it as much as this is us following what the state provides to us. Is that fair?
Right, this is data we're getting from the state and based on those intake interviews that they're doing at the call center level. But we are getting a little bit more information downstream as we get more details about the kinds of assistance and who's receiving that. But I do not have, first of all, it's a very small number of people who have so far really been assigned. There's a lot of people still in the interview process with the state to identify what their needs are. So in the future, I hope to be able to give you that information. I just do not have it now.
You have someone behind you who seems eager to speak.
Please.
Just to be clear, they don't collect racial demographic data. They do collect other at-risk population data. And so they are building while flying their data software right now. So we have asked, once they go through the needs assessment as well as the self-report assessment, so things like aging, children, other levels of need, they are asking for that information that would be available in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. And I know the county typically does keep track of everything we've got here, but for statewide programs where we're just praying they find someone who can help pay for it, our primary concern is providing that service as efficiently as possible.
And I just have one quick question as I'm trying to keep track of all the moving pieces and local, state, federal government. Are you all coordinating at all with Grow NC, the governor's new organization that's helping to coordinate this disaster response?
So the disaster case management is through DCP or DPS, the NCEM program. We've not had outreach from Grow for them. We are also coordinating with the local long-term recovery group that will also be building their own local-based disaster case management. And so we are coordinating with them as well.
Thank you all so much.
We have, to your point, Commissioner Ball, we have finally managed to get an every other week meeting scheduled with the Grow NC folks for county staff after a long process to get that on the calendar. So I am curious, Avril, if that is something that can be part of that conversation. Yeah.
And we would hope that we can add that to the briefings once we hear from them, but so
That would be
far we
great.
haven't had our first meeting yet.
It's not for a couple more weeks.
All right, thank you.
The next topic then is going to be hazard mitigation grant with Nate Pennington.
And I'm sorry, I think my point wasn't, I didn't express that very well. The question surrounding the data collection point that Commissioner Ball asked, is that something that can be elevated to Grow NC?
Oh, thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't say that very well. Thank you. And it will be nice to have those updates from Grow NC once those meetings start. Hi, Nate. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm going to be brief today. The hazard mitigation program is still somewhat in its infancy. Actually, tonight on the consent agenda is one of the first steps, a very important step that you all will take, and that is basically delegating the county manager to work directly with staff and the subject matter experts as we move through the hazard mitigation grant program itself. Now, as a reminder, this is a state-centric model. We are the first state in the nation to actually run with the state in lead with this program. And there's a lot of benefit to that because we get to work directly with the state as we move through the different buckets that's part of this program. As we've discussed with you all before, the program historically, in 2004, for example, we had hazard mitigation grant program here. We did some buyouts. They're called acquisitions of properties. For those of you all familiar that have been here for a long time, Spirits on the River was one that we all remember. But we also did some buyouts, Old Candler Town Road, and also Old US 70 and US 70, because we had a similar setup with Helene of major flooding on the Swannanoa and French Broad River. The numbers that I've shown you just on this slide are just a quick overview. These are going to change over time, but they represent sort of the different buckets that we're going to see. Elevations, reconstructions, those tend to be very straightforward and easy. Anytime you can get someone to elevate your house, or you can tear down a home that doesn't meet standards, that was heavily damaged, and reconstruct to meet standards, that's a great thing. The ones that are going to take a lot more work are going to be in the landslide and acquisition bucket. And of course, we're also coordinating directly with our municipalities as well as we move through this process. We had GIS put together just a quick map just to kind of show you. Again, like to point out that with this storm, high concentration, especially using a dividing line of north to south through Asheville along the French Broad corridor and moving out with the D for damage going east, and especially in the Barnersville, Swannanoa, Black Mountain, Guerin Creek, Fairview, and Broad River areas in particular. Each of the colored dots represents different types of applications that have been submitted thus far. Now keep in mind, with the state-centric model, folks are applying directly to the state. They then come back to us for review, and then that's why this evening you're going to look towards Averill in terms of delegating the authority of the county manager to work directly with staff on this process. Real quick, historically with the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, in particular with acquisitions, these are just sort of a basic run-through of what you typically see on acquisition properties. The first batch of applications that we saw all had common themes. Located adjacent to a waterway, lots of scouring, located in a special flood hazard area, and substantially damaged is the common theme. These are just other factors that staff is considering as we move through this process to align with both FEMA and the state and try to make this process as seamless as possible for folks to understand as we move through recovery. With that being said, that is just my brief overview. We will, of course, report back to you all frequently on this topic. Is there any questions?
Questions for Nate? All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Nate.
Commissioners, the last topic then is Jennifer Harrison talking about emergency water protection plan.
Good afternoon. We're here to talk about emergency watershed protection program, which I guess I need to advance that. There we go. Just a reminder that this program we affectionately call EWP is primarily focused on cleaning up waterways, as Dane discussed, but we can clean up beyond just what's in the water channel, but everything that's in the floodplain up to the 500-year floodplain. So we want to get debris not just out of the existing waterways, but also out of space that could easily be back in the waterway should we have another flood. So we can do waterway debris removal and primarily stabilize stream banks. So those are the two big focuses of emergency watershed protection. So this program is run by the Department of Ag, NRCS, National Resource Conservation Service. So EWP operated by USDA, by NRCS, and then done locally by BCSWCD, which is the Buncombe County Soil and Water Conservation District. So you should have all your acronyms for the day. Just to remind you, you've seen this before, the timeline for the program. We started back in November by asking for the assistance. Since then, we've been collecting damaged properties through our self-report tool. We are excited to say that we are launching the program. We launched it yesterday, and then it'll move through the review process. What I most want to call your attention to on this slide is that we know that it will take several months to get through all the site visits, and that the program takes a while. We're looking 3 years out to be able to finish, and that's hopeful. Depends on how many sites we have. So just level set. Yesterday we started. That's our fearless crew that got out into the out onto sites. Those are all Buncombe County Soil and Water staff, except the gentleman in the middle who is from Burke County. And the reason I point that out is because I want to express gratitude for the fact that we're not doing this alone. We have partners that are coming from our local extension service, as well as districts from across the state have been trained and come out and give us time. And then, of course, NRCS staff as well. So it's very much a group effort. And today we had 14 people out on staff. I had to provide the slide by last night. So at the end of the day yesterday, we had 9 surveys that were complete. We visited 12 sites. A couple of them were not eligible or had already done some repair work. Right before I came up here, I refreshed again, and we're already at 35. So it's moving. In the beginning, we're still getting our feet under us, learning the process. We generally go out in teams of 2. However, because we're training, we had groups of 4 at times today so that we make sure people feel comfortable being out. But you will see us out on the landscape in safety vests. We'll have tags on that alert you to who we are. And hopefully you'll never see anybody by themselves. We've done a lot of work to get the process up and running, including our amazing GIS team here at the county who built us a tool to be able to capture the data right out into the field. There's a lot of work, site mapping. We've had to do our right of entry and our hold harmless form. And then, of course, securing all the additional support staff is what we've been doing up to now, as well as evaluating the sites that are in the self-report tool. Originally, we had evaluated about 465 sites that we thought would be eligible. However, just last week, we received guidance that NRCS cannot include landslides as an eligible category for repair. And that's primarily due to the lack of expertise to be able to review the site designs and plans. So unfortunately, landslides are not covered under this program, but gratefully we have some other programs in the works to help our residents. So once we remove those, we are down to close to 370 sites. That number is also always changing as more people report on the self tool. So here's what it looks like, just to give you a sense of how diverse the call for help has been. You can see by far Swannanoa has submitted the most potentially eligible sites, and Cane Creek, so exactly where you'd expect to see it. We have started kind of more on the bottom of the list, to get our feet under us and to feel confident in all of the evaluation skills. So we've taken care of Newfound and Avery Creek and Bent Creek. We have started working today in the upper Swannanoa. We've been out to the Ivy today, Reams Creek. We've had some work in Flat Creek and Lees Creek as well. So that's what I have for you. Any questions?
Go ahead, Parker.
Jennifer, it's been a little while since we talked about this, so I'm hoping you can refresh my memory about how all of this works. Remind me how much money Congress appropriated to this program back in December.
So my understanding is that we haven't had an actual amount appropriated to us. The way the program works is everything is very prescriptive. In other words, we pay $30 per linear foot for X practice, $500 per ton, or whatever it is, depending on the practice. So we will submit all the projects. They will be deemed eligible. That's through our field data reports. We submit those to the state. The state reviews them and sends them back to us. If they deem them eligible, there's a second level that we do, which is a damage survey report. And basically that's saying, does the cost of repair supersede the value of what we're protecting? If it does not, it can move forward, and then it goes up to the national level for approval. And again, that pricing is not done on bids. It's all done on prescriptive pricing. They send it back with whatever they deem the appropriate amount for repair. In Fred, sometimes they gave us more money than we asked for. Most times they gave us less. So then we have to figure out what can we do within the boundaries of the funding amount. So that's all called financial assistance. Then there's a second bucket called technical assistance. And technical assistance is 10% of the financial assistance. So the money for construction, it's 10% of construction costs. Usually this program requires a 25% match from the local sponsor. Buncombe County is the local sponsor. In a presidentially declared disaster, it generally comes from the state. So in Fred, the state gave us the 25% match. The state generally doesn't match the technical assistance amount. So since the federal government is funding at 100%, we get the 10% on technical assistance. Generally speaking, our engineering and permitting costs are 20% of construction costs. So we have a deficit. It's all conjecture, because until we get out and actually assess the damage, we don't really know what that cost is going to be. Yesterday, I heard somebody say they're estimating $500 million in EWP, but again, that's not a hard number yet.
And last question, I guess generally speaking, for a project that's deemed eligible,
Mm-hmm.
can you describe kind of the scope of work we're talking about in terms of what would be done to the stream bank?
Sure. So generally speaking, there's two ways to look at stream bank work. It can either be stabilization or it can be full restoration. These programs are looking at stabilization. So we're looking at securing the bank, usually through some grading, bouldering, riprap, some kind of armoring of the bank, and then vegetation. And then we have a maintenance agreement that says, hey, don't cut down the vegetation, please, because that's what's keeping your bank there. In a restoration, of course, we would have a much larger buffer, and it would be more robust in its address. So on stream banks, it can be anywhere from very simple revegetation and some armoring to more significant with grading when we have extreme vertical banks, which is often what happens when we have a massive velocity of water moving through a stream. It can cut really deep. So in those, we would want to slope those back as much as possible. The other thing that I forgot to say was, in order to be available for this program or eligible, there has to be some imminent danger to a structure. And of course, that structure doesn't need to be a house or a barn. It can be a telephone pole or a utility pole. It can be a driveway, something along those lines. So how much that sloping can be and what that repair looks like can be dictated by how close we are to the structure that's needing to be saved. And those structures can also be bridges and culverts. Yeah.
Are there any more questions for Jennifer? All right, thanks,
Thank you.
Jennifer.
So a couple of updates, commissioners. So since we would not be back together again before Thursday, I do want to remind you that we do have a community resource, recovery for resource at Owen High on Thursday. And then next Tuesday, it will be at Reynolds High, and the following Thursday at Lester High. Oh, come on. Lillian can do that much better than I, so I'll let her go ahead and talk to those. And I think you want to update us on FEMA as well, right?
Well, yeah, I just pulled the microphone off. Sorry, guys. Just wanted to provide an update that with the winter storm coming in, FEMA's disaster recovery centers are closed tomorrow in Western North Carolina, but folks can still access that application at disasterassistance.gov via the FEMA app or by calling 1-800-621-3362. And we do have the event at Owen High drop-in on Thursday from 5 to 7. We're obviously watching the weather on that. And if it changes, we'll communicate that out tomorrow. And then we have events the following week, Tuesday and Thursday, Reynolds High, Lester Community Center. Thanks to everyone who came last week in Barnersville.
And lastly, Commissioner, I don't want to stop without telling you and reminding you at the end of the presentation that we just went over for Helene. They're the appendix slides. That gives you all the data points that we just covered, as well as even more than that. So please use that to help spread the word with your constituents, because that is a full repository of all of our data. And that's Helene. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. We have Jillian Phillips and Shannon Capizzelli from Planning here to talk about a small area plan update. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. So, based on the comprehensive plan recommendations and the impacts of Hurricane Helene, I'm going to be going over a proposal for a small area and recovery plan for the Swannanoa area. So the purpose of this plan would be to work with elected officials, residents, and stakeholders to draft a plan that is specific to Swannanoa, and that would be to address the particular needs and challenges, its recovery, and its growth, the growth pressures that are for that specific corridor. It also would address the changed landscape and development challenges from the hurricane and achieve the vision and goals from the comprehensive plan. So to give you a comparison, we're all familiar with the comprehensive plan at this point. That's more of a broad vision that covers the entire county. Those actions and policies within the plan are for the whole county, but with a small area plan, and specifically with the recovery plan for Swannanoa, we would have a very focused vision, very focused goals and actions, even down to specific roads or parcels, possibly. And it would just be that single corridor or neighborhood view. So these are the focus areas that were outlined in the comprehensive plan, and I've got some examples shown around it of how issues that are unique to Swannanoa could be incorporated into those focus areas. So we might have specific recommendations or goals related to buffering and green space, resiliency hub and the library, things for disaster recovery specifically. So lots of different types of topics that we would tie back to the comprehensive plan focus areas that we had previously identified. This is a tentative timeline, and it's broken into two phases. So there's a pre-budget phase, and then there is a post-budget phase after funding had been obtained. The pre-budget phase assumes that we could start the process immediately without having funds allocated. And some of the things that we can do without funding include bringing information to the boards about what the process could look like, drafting RFPs, and beginning an existing conditions study to start pulling data and plans that are already existing and analyzing that. And then once funding was obtained, whether that be through the county process or through grants or some other source, that's when we could begin moving into selection of a consultant, steering committee creation, and then the public engagement process. So based on what we're planning, based on those two phases of the timeline, we're looking at a 1.5 to 2 year process. The number of proposed meetings is outlined here. This would be the minimum necessary to have a robust public engagement process where we are working with the different boards and committees, having public meetings, and being able to work through all of the different stages of the planning process. Community input would be similar to the comprehensive plan in that we would have our planning board meetings, we would be bringing information to the commissioners regularly, and we'd also have a resident steering committee. And then the public engagement meetings would include a kickoff. It could include things like a SWOT analysis or design charrettes, and then the typical drop-in meetings and virtual activity options. Other outreach would be direct mailing to all Swannanoa residents, social media campaigns, posting signs, that sort of thing, as well as coordination with our community partners. So participation would include residents and stakeholders. They would be providing data and input throughout the different phases of the planning process and ongoing feedback to staff. We do want to note that we would be looking to have a trauma-informed engagement process if needed, and that is something that we are aware of and researching as we think about what the process might look like. Resident Steering Committee would also provide guidance and feedback, not just on the process, but also on public input and on the plan drafting. And a technical expertise committee would be formed, which would be like our utility providers. So NCDOT and MSD service providers in the area who have more technical knowledge about what would be feasible in looking at the data, existing conditions, and any type of recommendations that we might come up with. Then the planning board would provide oversight of the process and public input, and they would assist with drafting the recommendations that would end up in that plan. And Board of Commissioners also with oversight and feedback throughout, also authorizing the planning process to begin through budgets and scheduling, approving the consultant and selecting the resident steering committee members, and doing ongoing input and feedback to staff before finally adopting a plan. Some of the resources that we would need to do this process would be different county departments, planning department acting as the project manager for the plan. We would need help from CAPE, the equity office, IT departments, legal, and strategy and innovation. And then contracted services would include things like language interpretation and translation, planning consulting firm, maybe some technical experts, advertising and marketing costs, and then some outside printing costs. This is a budget estimate based on a staff-led process with technical consultant help, and the majority of the cost goes into the consultant fees and language services, which is that interpretation and translation. So if we were to begin now, pre-budget, we're assuming that the majority of that budget would be spent in fiscal year 2026, and then the remaining 20% would be in 27. So some of the challenges that we're anticipating would be if we were to rely on grants to fund this process. A lot of those grants require specific topics or actions be included in the plan. So for instance, if we were to obtain a grant that had health focus, then that plan is going to be more health focus heavy. So it's something to think about as we're looking at the different funding options. The grant funding, it also increases the administrative work for staff. And there are some types of grants, specifically federal grants, that would potentially require a project manager for the grant itself. Disaster-related trauma, I think I had mentioned that before, just being sensitive to the fact that residents have been through something very traumatic, and that might change the way that we need to do engagement and that we need to reach people for this process. Locating and engaging with displaced residents is another big question mark. We know a lot of people have had to leave, or they're not living in the place where their mail might be going according to the tax department. So that's something that we need to work through. And then, as with any planning process, getting community buy-in and dealing with competing interests are some of the other challenges. So right now, staff's actively looking for grants to help with funding this process. We're also looking for options for free technical assistance, which can help to reduce some of our consultant costs. And we believe that philanthropic funding may be more realistic given the federal funding landscape right now. I am happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, because this is something that the Swannanoa Valley's been wanting even before Helene, and now, of course, it's more important than ever to be able to work with them. So I really appreciate staff bringing this forward to us, and it looks like you've put a lot of thought into it. So thank you.
I just want to say thank you also, as the Swannanoa native, for giving some attention. They need it.
So I have a couple questions or concerns. First of all, I think it's a great idea. You know, we've heard from people over the last few months looking for a plan, wanting to see that there is a plan and that we're talking about what to do. And I think this is one example of how we can kind of show the community and also include the community in moving forward. I also know that the planning department staff, you guys are already very busy. You've been through a storm too. You're doing other stuff. I don't even know what all happens in your various workloads these days in response to Helene. That goes for all the departments, I guess. So I'm concerned about your staff time and your what you've got going on over the next year. I'm also thinking back to, if my brain will allow me to think back before the hurricane, to when after the comprehensive plan was passed, we had a calendar. I'm trying to conjure up this memory of a calendar of the various things we were going to do with the comp plan after it was adopted. I think the first thing on that slide I remember was short-term rentals, and there was a group of other things we were going to do. I don't remember if this was on that list or not. And I bring that up to ask that question, but also, how does this impact, or will this impact, the kind of other things we had planned together prior to the hurricane in terms of working on land use regulations and the various other post-comp plan considerations?
I think that's a very good point that you bring up, and I think that as professional planners, we're always having to adjust based on sets of circumstances. If we really want to put all of our attention into recovery efforts, and I've talked with a number of you all, obviously floodplain management is front and center and is located in the planning department, but I think it's important that we reconsider sort of that initial bucket list, and I think this obviously is something that we all consider high priority now. Right. So I think some of the adjustments that need to be made are text amendments that support things like missing middle housing, one zoning district away from ending single-family zoning, which we are planning to package that up and send that to the planning board very soon, and do anything and everything we can to speak to economic development. We know that after the storm, we tried to fire back up the planning board and the board of adjustment as soon as possible, because the more permanent units we can get out there, the more we can lower. Everything is now related, whether it be hazard mitigation grant, whether it be housing recovery, whether it be EWP. They're all starting to join together to bring us back where we need to be. And if we can get hammers out in the community swinging and bring a plan together that tries to, and I will tell you, there are a lot of competing interests, and there's a lot of different visions of what Swannanoa is going to look like in the future, but we need to have some kind of plan so that we're not stepping on each other's toes.
I guess with all that's great. Thank you, Dave. My request of staff, I guess, would be to, when you get a moment, to rethink that calendar and that kind of post-comp plan list of activities and hopes for the next couple of years, so we as a commission kind of look at that again.
Yes, and to Nate's point, some of the things that was on that calendar was text amendments.
Yeah.
So now we get to look and see which ones we want to bring forward first.
Yeah.
And then second. But right now, my I guess guidance to staff has been, let's focus on getting Helene back, and small area plan was on that list. And we will look at that list again and bring it to you. But the next thing after SDR was text amendments.
Right.
And the text amendments that we're talking about now, we would need to elevate the ones that will help us to recover faster, and then we can go back and look at the rest of them.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, thank you for that. We'll bring you we call them our buckets. We'll bring them to you again.
Can I just clarify also that when we were looking at implementation for the comprehensive plan, because text amendments will typically take such a long time, the assumption is that you'll also be working on your small area plans at the same time.
Yeah, I was recently meeting with some members of our community, and they were asking about what Helene meant for the work of the comp plan. And I think if anything, it makes the work of the comp plan even more relevant and allowing us to expedite some of the work and maybe shift around that timeline just a little bit to address the needs. So I think we are very fortunate in the fact that we had that comp plan ready so that we can begin the recovery work. So we appreciate y'all. Are there any further questions for?
A quick one, Avril. Just, I might have missed it, but just for my edification, what percentage of this endeavor could we fund with grants in your mind? If you had your 2025 is going to go exactly as I hope, which is not going to be the case for any of us.
We would hope 100%, but to her point, with federal dollars we're not sure what's happening with federal dollars. We don't know right now.
Right.
So we're looking at all aspects. We're hoping that CDBG DR does happen for Buncombe County, and not all of it prescriptive in housing or some other function, that we can use some of those funds. But we are looking for funds, and we're hoping that we can cover it 100%. But I wouldn't tell you that that's realistic today, given the environment with the federal funds.
Is it reasonable to believe that we should just go ahead and err on the conservative side and set money aside to make sure we can fully fund this endeavor on our own? Because it seems like everyone's on board with this idea, but I don't want us to reach a point come July where we're changing course on something that we all really want to see happen.
That would be a request for the budget conversation. So right now, we can have it as part of the budget, and hopefully that we can find grants, we won't have to use it. But it would come as part of your budget request.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much. Oh, Mason Scott is joining us for our LOBS public hearing. Hi, Mason.
How are y'all? Good afternoon. For those of you that I haven't met, I am Mason Scott. I'm the Assistant Finance Director. I am standing in on behalf of Melissa this afternoon. This discussion, I think, will be a bit of a change of pace for the briefing thus far, so I'll pause. Different type of finance things. Today, I'm initiating the process to discuss refunding of previously issued bonds. So for us, a bond refunding is equivalent to refinancing a loan. In North Carolina, local governments have several steps that we have to go through every time we enter into any level of debt transaction. A part of that will be multiple checkpoints with you all. So today is the first step in a process that we hope to complete in April. So I will begin with the first formal action that we will in the future be requesting of you as a board. At your March 4th regular meeting, we will ask you to consider a findings resolution related to the 2025 limited obligation bond series. That resolution will do a few things. One of those is that it will clarify the original debt issuance that this debt transaction is refinancing. So specifically, in 2015, the county issued bonds for the capital improvement of several buildings for the county, for the school systems, and for AB Tech. A notable project on that list is the renovation and building deck addition to the county's Health and Human Services building at 40 Cox Avenue. Our standard terms for debt series are 20-year links with an opportunity at 10 years to call, refinance, and realize some savings. So we are approaching that 10-year mark for the 2015 deal this June, and so this is our first opportunity to potentially refinance and realize some savings. The next thing that resolution will do is define a not to exceed amount. So as you see here, we are planning to issue not more than $70 million, which should be sufficient to pay off the outstanding amount of debt related to that 2015 deal. Monies from that debt issuance will also pay off the cost of issuance related to this refinancing. So things like the fee for application to the state, legal fees, engaging with other professional partners to do the work in the interest of the county. Finally, this resolution will authorize the county manager and the finance officer to engage formally for that application to the state to engage in the debt transaction. Next up, this slide kind of speaks to the why. There are some pictures here that I'll get to, but as you might in your personal life, Buncombe County regularly monitors our outstanding debt for opportunities for savings. So this is something that we have been watching for a while. Based on the current market rate environment, we anticipate between $4 and $4.6 million in savings from this deal. Savings equate to a reduction in our semi-annual debt service payments, so basically our loan payments, and that will benefit us over the remaining life of that 2015 deal between now and the original maturity in 2035. These gauges show the potential allocation of savings across the funds and activities where the original debt in 2015 was spent. So you'll see that the county, our general fund, has the lion's share, and then kind of going down the line from there. As far as next steps, I'll come back to March 4th. At the regular meeting, again, we'll ask you to formally consider the findings resolution that we've talked about today. We'll also ask you to hold a public hearing that is required by state law for debt transactions. In the briefing prior to that meeting, we will introduce another resolution, which will kind of be the final engaging resolution for this debt activity. On March 18th, we'll come back to you for a closeout of your part of this process and ask for your consideration of the formal and final issuance resolution. Are there any questions about this?
Mason, on an annual basis, approximately how much will this save us?
So I've seen many tables and charts over the last few weeks. I want to say around $500,000, but I think there are some opportunities and considerations on how we spread that. Again, this does, to Nate's point, tie back together. I think there are opportunities for us to use the savings creatively and on a schedule that's most meaningful for us. But if we spread it evenly, about $500,000 a year across all funds, so schools, AV Tech, and the county.
Any other questions for Mason? All right, thank you.
Thanks, all.
And we have a broadband update from E.B. Ottersall. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here to share an update today about our broadband projects. I'll be sharing updates on our GREAT grant programs and then the CAB grant program, as well as an update about cell phone service in our area, and then next steps related to broadband expansion in Buncombe County. For our project updates, our first is a GREAT grant for Skyrunner. This contract was finalized in April of 2022, and our first grant installment was paid last year in March. The areas impacted by this broadband expansion project are Leicester and Fairview, and the awarded locations are 493. The anticipated construction period is set to end in November of this year. So far, it sounds as though Skyrunner is on track to meet that time period. In their last report, which we received, the reporting period ended for December 31st of 2024. Their project design process was between 25% and 75% complete. Construction was between 25% and 75% complete as well. And they also noted in that report that their infrastructure damage from Helene, they had completed repairs on all of their infrastructure damage. Our second GREAT grant opportunity was with Frontier. This contract was finalized in May of 2023, and we also paid out that first grant installment in last year in June. The area impacted is in North Buncombe, and we awarded 964 locations there. This construction period was scheduled to end in April this year. However, due to Helene, Frontier has requested an extension. They put in that extension request to NCDIT, the Department of Information Technology. They've not yet heard back about that request, but they let me know that they would stay in touch about that request and any updates. For their last report, which we also received, the reporting period ending in December 31st, 2024, their project design is at 100% complete, and their construction is at less than 25% of complete. And then our last broadband expansion program that I wanted to update you on was the Completing Access to Broadband, or CAB project, that was awarded last summer to Bell South, or AT&T. The contract was finalized in July, and while we had previously discussed a county match for it, that match requirement was removed by the General Assembly in November of last year. The areas impacted by this project will be Broad River, Upper Hominy, and Fairview. We awarded 967 locations there. I got in touch with Bell South ahead of their reporting period, and they shared that the construction period that's set to end in October of 2026, they're still on track for that despite damage from Helene.
EB, before you go on,
Yes.
can you back up? I have a question on, with all of the, with the cab, that's great that they're on schedule. With the great grants, didn't they have 2 years from the time they signed the contract that they were supposed to have this complete?
Correct. They have a time period that they are to complete in, and that is the reason for the extension request is they had a construction due date for the Frontier project that they will, they've said that they are anticipating they'll have difficulty completing due to some permitting, but also the delays from Helene. So they are in touch with NCDIT about potentially extending that timeline. And we're waiting on news from DIT about that request.
Okay, and then the Skyrunner then, I mean, that was 2022. So, and they're only 25 to 75% complete, where that should be 100% complete by this time, if that was April of 2022.
The construction time period for the Skyrunner project is set to end in November of this year, so they do still have some runway for their construction. They're also waiting, both projects are waiting on permits for setting the wires on poles. And so I know that they're in communication about the permitting. They do still have until November for the construction period on this project, but we will stay in touch as we get closer to that deadline.
And the permitting on the poles, that's with who are they working with that on?
I will need to follow up on that specific question, but that is what the status was on their last report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just jumping ahead, NCDIT provides counties with these broadband expansion profiles in order to track progress. The most recent NCDIT profile that I was able to pull from their website is missing the CAB project, but the purpose here is to give an overview of all of the projects there. And if you did see the CAB project here, you would see that more of those purple and blue hexagons would be filled in at the bottom. But this is just to show that the county is making significant progress towards the goal to provide broadband expansion. With the outset of the projects in 2016, when the county first started investigating broadband expansion, there was an estimated 15,000 unserved or underserved locations, and currently NCDIT estimates that we have just over 2,000 remaining unserved or underserved locations. And there will be additional granting opportunities that we can continue working with the state on in order to make more progress towards broadband expansion with those remaining unserved or underserved locations.
Before you move this off, on Commissioner, your question around the poles and the permitting, I want to be clear that is not a Buncombe County permitting process. It's actually the owner of the poles, which is typically Duke. So they're putting the poles, yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry, to clarify this slide, the purple hexagons, what do those represent?
They represent a density of unserved or underserved households. So the deeper the color gets, the greater need there is for broadband expansion in that region. And that need is part of the justification process for bringing a project to that area. So when we look at the map, it just shows us where we still need to provide additional service.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. And then we also wanted to provide an update on cell phone service post-Helene. You all may recall that during the response period, we were receiving updates from providers about cell phone recovery. As of October 20th of last year, cell phone service recovery was over 98% or within the normal range of operations. And so we stopped receiving those reports. Our IT department does receive ongoing information from different departments who go out into the field about if they are seeing issues. Some examples would be problems flagged by public safety or our inspectors and social workers in the past, and we anticipate that departments will continue to do that if they see any issues. But we just wanted to flag too that if you or any community members are continuing to have cell phone service issues, that's something that you can bring to our attention. Additionally, Buncombe County IT is working with carriers to lease space for equipment at 2 sites for our towers, Broad River and the landfill. Buncombe County will continue to make about 15 tower sites available for lease to providers as we move forward. For next steps on the existing projects, the CAB and GREAT grants that we discussed today, as I mentioned, we're anticipating that construction will conclude in 2025 and 2026 for GREAT and CAB. We also recently received a notice of award for the NTIA, or National Telecommunications and Information Administration Digital Equity Award. We participated in an application that was submitted by Land of Sky. The application was called WNC Connecting All Communities. Land of Sky was the lead applicant, but Buncombe County Libraries is a participating partner. When we move forward, the purpose of the grant will be to be providing mobile digital equity services. The Buncombe County Libraries would purchase a mobile library unit and then provide digital equity access in rural and low to moderate income communities. There are more details to come. NTIA and Land of Sky are evaluating the impact of recent executive orders, and so we're awaiting news on that before we move forward with grant agreements. And then finally have upcoming broadband opportunities to share. We're still awaiting guidance on the third and final state initiative called the Stopgap Grant Program. We were anticipating that we would receive information about this last year, but NCDIT delayed the program due to Helene. The program will be leaning towards smaller projects, so bringing access to very remote and more expensive locations, such as a neighborhood or area with fewer than 25 houses. And there is a potential opportunity for provider, county, and resident input process to identify areas and apply for that grant funding, but we're still awaiting guidance on how this program will operate. And we have recently received information about the second CAB award process. Continuing access to broadband, or CAB, is a state-run process. Buncombe County will be participating in the application review, and we're still awaiting information on the proposals. And it's mentioned below that scope of work for Buncombe County is anticipated mid-February. We're still waiting on that information. Any further questions about broadband expansion?
Well, I definitely want to say thank you to staff and to Land of Sky, who have been great partners in this work, and also the volunteers that were part of this working group that have helped throughout the past several years, because they definitely put a lot of time into helping with all this, and we've certainly made progress over this time. And I hope that we get some good news on that Land of Sky on the Connecting Communities project. I think was at about $4 million that we were, or they were expecting to help with that project. It was a pretty significant amount, I think. Yeah.
It was, yeah, multiple millions. The idea with the project is that there'll be multiple participating community partners. Land of Sky will be the coordinating entity and will provide information and programming about digital access, while the participating partners would help get the word out and move around in the region. But it was a regional application, a very competitive grant process, and yeah, a great application by Land of Sky.
We hope that will be to come. I think that's getting held up with what's going on federally right now.
Yes, I think you're right.
Thank you.
Any other questions for EB? All right, thank you so much. We appreciate your work.
Thank you, commissioners.
Does anyone have any items for open discussion this evening? All right, if not, hearing none, we will adjourn until 5 p.m. Thanks, everyone. We're adjourned.